Good morning and welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. It's good to see you today. And today we're talking about Colossians chapter 3, and we're talking about verse 18 and 19. Very controversial passage in today's society, which says, I guess I got to turn that back on to see that. Which says, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as it is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. It is not very popular to say, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands in today's enlightened society where we have feminism and all kinds of other things. And so, what do we do with this passage? And quite frankly, this is a passage that has concerned me for a while. And I used to try to say these kinds of things in a way that made them more appealing to today's society. But I want to look at things a little differently today. I want us to, and I'm going to present something to you that's very different than how you're going to hear about this kind of stuff from any other channel. And I'm talking about from anything from the typical Christian channels you might be used to, all the way to the people who are supporting women pastors or whatever. It's going to be a little different. All right. So I need you to hang with me. I'm excited and I'm about this, trepidatious about this a little bit at the same time. I'm excited about it because the information is very good and useful. And Brother Melms doesn't like it. Giuseppe Scampato does like it, and it will help Giuseppe Scampato get to adulthood. By the way, we've been joined in our but Giuseppe is with us in the chat section. So it's good to see Giuseppe here. So what we want to do is we want to make it to adulthood as a sea turtle, like Giuseppe has. And what I'm going to tell you today is not going to be something that Brother Melms likes at all. And it may trigger your inner Brother Melms to say a bunch of nonsense. But stick with me because when we get to the payload at the end, I think it's going to be well worth it. And so I'm excited because it's good information. I think it's helpful. I am a little trepidatious about it because people have very strong emotional opinions about the topics that we're going to be touching on today, and they already think certain things and will not be able to hear what I'm saying at all. They're just going to knee-jerk react and blurt out their own opinions, which are not really even their own opinions. They're Brother Melm's opinions coming through them, and we do not want them. So welcome everybody aboard. While we are here, it's good to say hello. We couple little things we want to say here. What do we want to say? First of all, I got to turn on my shared screen. Thanks to everybody who supports the channel. If you want to support the channel, go to beyondthefundamentals.com and click on the donate tab, or you can go to this little QR code up here. We operate completely off what comes off this channel. When it dries up, we dry up and go away, or we change the business model, something like that. If you appreciate the time, effort, and thought equity that goes into these episodes, stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else from a Christian perspective, please consider supporting us. Do the thing. Go to beyondthefundamentals.com and drop us something in Zelle, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, something like that, or Wise. And we are on Facebook and X, Twitter, X. You can follow us there, subscribe to this channel, share the stuff that you hear here. So for those of you who are with us for the first time, this is part 19 of our series in Colossians, part 19, okay? And so we've covered a lot of other stuff so far, stuff which is not intuitive to an American, like a Western cultural way of thinking, nor to a standard churchianity way of thinking. So it's not like you can just, I don't know if you can really pick up at episode 19 and get where we're coming from, because all of these episodes build off the previous episodes. And our approach here is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is not a set of beliefs. I'm actually going to go on somebody else's channel on the 11th of January and be talking about biblical interpretation in light of how Catholics see things versus non-Catholics, okay? And the host was talking about, where our beliefs come from, and triggers me because Christianity is not a set of beliefs. It's not that there aren't things that are believed, but that's not the thing. The thing is our being, our practical being, and our everyday interactions. Life is a series of interactions, and if you are a Christian, those interactions should have a certain flavor to them. And if your interactions don't have that flavor, that order, disorder, reorder uh, component, the gospel living out in your life, then that's not Christianity. Christianity is a set of beliefs, is not a set of beliefs. It's a way of being, kind of like surfing is a thing you do. We are actively surfing life in the way of Jesus. We're not just believing things. Okay. The kind of Christianity that looks at Christianity as a set of beliefs is kind of an idolatrous kind of sort of thing. And then also, above all things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness, according to Paul over here. Okay. So Paul, Jesus, Peter, and John, they all elevate charity, love above all other things. So that's our approach here. If you don't like it, that's fine. I'm going to start going through the content. We're looking at this passage. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. As we look at this, we need to remember what we've covered so far in Colossians, and that is that the head of all principality and power is inside you, Christ in you, the hope of glory, Colossians 1:27. So that being the case, if the head of all principality and power is inside you, why are ye subject to external ordinance from the commandments and doctrines of men, such as taste not, touch not, handle not, okay, which are all external things. So the whole thing of the kind of wisdom that Paul is trying to cultivate in the Colossians is an internalized wisdom that comes from the inside out. Christ in you, the hope of glory, not something that's externally imposed on you through a certain set of behaviors. And then last week we talked about how, ironically, right after clearing this up, he then proceeds to give quite a bit of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. And what we talked about last week is that um, these are not end all be all authoritative dogmatic statements. These are pre-transformational guidance statements that kind of keep your nose clean until destiny calls on you at a time other than your own choosing. Be ready. Afford yourself choice at all times. Be fit, be ready. And the analogy that we gave was like if you gave general fitness instructions to somebody or tell them, hey, in 2 years, you're going to be competing in the Olympics, but we're not going to tell you what sport. What would you do for the next 2 years? You would condition yourself in the most general way possible so that you could do the most amount of things physically. But once you were told, okay, now you're going to be sprinting, or now you're going to be running a 26-mile marathon in the Olympics, you're going to prepare for those things very differently. And now you're going to tailor and hone what you are doing toward the specific aim of sprinting or running a 26-mile marathon or doing the bobsled, whatever it is, you're going to train very specifically. So all of this stuff that Paul gives in the New Testament, there is no post-wisdom guidance in the Bible. It is all pre-wisdom guidance because by definition, those who have wisdom do not need guidance. Does that make sense? And so this guidance is to afford the most choice possible so that when you get your vocational calling sorted out, you can proceed toward that aim with wisdom. And all of this stuff, I want to say, kind of goes out the window, but kind of becomes transparent. There will come times when any one set of guidance does not apply to a particular situation, and that all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient. Doing the thing that is kind of against what we're told is the right thing to do in the situation in which you find yourself. That's why it's you cannot pre-specify relevance. We overestimate our capacity to pre-specify relevance when we're writing things like rules, regulations, laws, systematic theologies, and it comes out when life comes at us 100 miles an hour that was not, after all, the thing. Okay, so we can't pre-specify all of this stuff in a set of rules. What we can do is make ourselves ready for the cultivation of wisdom, which is what these kinds of guidance do. It kind of keeps your nose clean, kind of keeps you out of trouble until you find out what you're supposed to be doing. Then you start aiming for something with gazelle intensity and don't let up. I have a lot of things I'm going to say here. We're going to we're going to look at marriage today as if, and you should do a lot of things this way, as if let's pretend that you have to recreate God's wisdom from the ground up, understanding causes and effects and incentives and rewards. Okay. So we're going to look at this like an anthropologist would, like Jane Goodall studying monkeys would do. Okay. And let's look at humans, human behavior. All right. So what do I have in my slides here today? Kind of embarrassment I'm about to bring on myself. So is this guidance outdated that we get from Paul? Is the guidance outdated? Is it just coming from a misogynistic first century religious person who wasn't even married anyway? As with many things in the Bible, it's helpful to get the idea that this is guidance that's coming from uh, from how some Hebraic megazeus has decided things should be, and think of it more like advice from someone who understands the core components of how reality works. So in last week's session, we already clarified that there's no post-wisdom guidance in Scripture. Those who are wise by definition do not require guidance. This is pre-transformational guidance. It's like a general workout diet plan, which would be insufficient for anyone preparing to compete in the Olympics, but would continue to afford choice. That's the definition of love that we're working with, the affordance of choice. It would continue to afford choice for most people in most scenarios that lack specificity and are in the general domain. I'm going to say a lot of things today that are very counterintuitive to the ways that we've been programmed to think in culture and in church. So please withhold all contrarian knee-jerk reactions to anything that you hear me say today. You will need to think about this probably for at least several weeks, but more likely several months before you can perceive and accept the wisdom behind what I'm going to tell you today. A lot of experience and research is behind what I'm going to be saying. If I was just going to be vomiting back all the things that a good Baptist is supposed to say, it would be really quick and I wouldn't have to prepare and I wouldn't need this disclaimer, but it would also be useless and it would contribute to the ongoing unnecessary suffering that many of you have already endured, that many of you are continuing to cause, and that many of you and your kids and grandkids have coming your way. So if it wasn't serious, I wouldn't take the time or effort or risk to share this information with you. So please have respect for what has gone into this. I want to introduce you to something that is called the Dunbar number. The Dunbar number is a range. It really goes from about 100 to about 250, but the going number that you see in most of the literature is something like 150. And when people say the Dunbar number, that's typically the number that they have in mind, even though realistically it's actually a range. But they're talking about 150 more or less most of the time. So anthropologically, let's look back at the history of mankind and see different arrangements that we may or may not be used to that we know mankind has done. So when you are equal to or below the Dunbar number, like in this row, the organization of society, yes, we're talking about marriage and wives, husbands, we're talking about all that anthropologically. Okay. How are people organized? Well, below Dunbar number, equal to or below Dunbar number societies, they're basically tribal and they're personal. And their sustenance, how do they get their food? They're hunter gatherers. Where was their location? They're nomadic. They move around. What is their hierarchy in religion? Sometimes it is matriarchal, not every time, but it's often matriarchal. You'll find a lot of female deities in this kind of thing, and you'll find that females have a lot more say in what goes on with the tribe and that sort of stuff. How is child rearing done? It is tribal. Like when Hillary Clinton, I know some of y'all triggered by that name, when she says it takes a village, she's talking about all the different people that contribute to child rearing other than the parents. And as it turns out, pre-agrarian societies had they did not have paternal certainty. In other words, you weren't sure who the parents were except for the mother, and the tribe raised the kids. So it wasn't like any specific, like all the women would nurse all the babies, and all the men were father figures to the kids. And there could be certainty over who the mother was, but there might not be certainty over who the father was. I don't want you to cast judgments on whether this is right or wrong. I just want you to understand that this is how things have been in the past for mankind. This is important to consider things how we are moving forward. And the mating situation, often in these situations, was often many to many. Okay. You would be in a tribe and mating. Sometimes you might have there could be tribal arrangements where there's a primary person, but monogamy was much less frequent in these situations, in Dunbar and below tribal situations in mankind's past, and in some remote tribes today, where we can study the behavior of these people who have not been influenced by society. So above Dunbar number, you have to structure. So when you're Dunbar and below, you have the capacity to basically personally know everybody. So all the organ yeah, the organization here is tribal and personal because you can know about 150 people personally. Now, when you start to get above that number, you stop having the ability to know everybody personally, and that creates issues. And it creates things that need to be solved. We need to do things a few different ways. So what happens when societies are above Dunbar numbers is that instead of being tribal and personal, now we have something like a social contract. In other words, there's an expected way to behave when I go to the store and I deal with a cashier or a salesperson. I may have never met them before, but there's a certain amount of politeness and expectation and understanding of what we are doing interacting with each other that we both know in advance without having to organize it or know each other personally or plan for it. We both know what we're there for, what we're there to do. I'm there to buy groceries or a car or something like that, and they are there to sell it to me, and we're going to be polite and cordial and nice and kind while we do it, unless I'm some kind of maniac. Now, also the sustenance now, instead of being a hunter-gatherer, it's going to be agrarian, and which ties into parental certainty, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And then the location, instead of being nomadic, you're going to be stationary because if you're planting food, you got to stay there until it ripens so you can harvest it. And then the hierarchy of religion changes to patriarchal, the child rearing changes to parental, and then the mating is either one to many, not many to many. You might have polygamy or you might have one to one monogamy in this kind of situation. Now, parental certainty is key here because I'm stationary and I need to be able to pass off the land. I need to an heir. And if I'm passing off the land to an heir, now we need to know who the dad is. Whereas in previous societies, it wasn't so important to know who the dad was because it really didn't affect how the kids were going to be raised. Are we following so far? Now, what might cause a gap in this number? Why would societies go from below Dunbar numbers to above Dunbar numbers? And this may seem counterintuitive, but it could be something as simple as the technology of the plow being invented. Technological inventions have huge consequences for society that extend far beyond the extended scope of their engineering. In other words, somebody's like, hey, I'm just trying to plant some grains and legumes. This device will help me do it better. That's all they're thinking. That's the scope of what they're trying to do. I'm just trying to plant these things. But now I have land that I'm planting them on, that I'm going to stay on. So I might as well build a house. A house dweller is what the name husband means. Husband means house dweller. I'm no longer nomadic. Now I'm staying on my land. I'm going to build a house there, and I'm operating this plow. Now my wife is pregnant, and I send her out to operate the plow. What happens? She miscarries the baby. Well, guess what? Women aren't going to be out there operating the plow when they're carrying the babies inside them. So we need the men to do this work. This changes the society from a possibly matriarchally dominated society into a patriarchal society because now the form of sustenance is highly reliant upon uh, something that men are physically optimized for, physical strength, physical labor. Okay. Are we following so far? So just this one little thing is going to require an heir to pass the land down to. It's going to require a house. Now you're a husband dweller. You're a house dweller, which is is husbandry. A house. Husband means house dweller. And if you're going to have paternal certainty, so you know who the heir is, now we're going to have some kind of contract with the mating to where we know who the kids are. Does that make sense? So now you might have polygamy. You might have one husband with multiple wives, or you might have monogamy, one husband with one wife, that kind of thing. And there are still societies today that have polygamy. There are still some societies that have polyandry, all kinds of different things. But so what I'm trying to do is trying to think about how marriage would have developed from an anthropological standpoint. I know what the Bible says. I know what we're told to think as Christians. Oh, God instituted marriage. But what I'm trying to do is help us understand the wisdom behind what God might not do without the external authority just telling us. Okay, we Christians are pretty bad. We are pretty stupid because we just take things on face value without understanding the wisdom behind why things might be that way. And it turns out that there's some wisdom behind why things might be that way, which is very important for when you're cultivating wisdom on your own for it to reach a particular goal, which maybe has never been specified before in human history. I may need to generate rules or guidelines for myself that are optimized for what I'm trying to do, which might not exist anywhere else, and I might have to generate them myself. So I have to figure out how to regenerate the wisdom of proverbial God in the absence of written guidance that has been provided by proverbial God. How would I do that? Now, what else might happen in a society that could cause some major societal changes? Okay. Maybe in 1892, somebody invents the tractor. Well, I can't have a woman out there who's pregnant pushing and pushing a plow, and plus men are typically physically stronger, and so it's more efficient for a man to be doing it anyway. So then you start having complementarian separation of duties in a particular way that's different than a hunter-gatherer society, which had a different separation of complementary duties, of societally expected complementary duties. Now, I do not favor complementarianism as an ideology, but any relationship or partnership that you are in will have either default complementarianism or negotiated complementarianism. In other words, you don't need to be doubling your effort. You don't need to have both people doing the same things. If I've mowed the yard, I don't need you to also mow the yard. I mean, maybe you do it next week, but while I'm mowing it, I am doing it and you aren't. Or maybe I'm mowing and you're weed eating, but you're not mowing, I am. You're weed eating. See, that's you negotiate your complementarianism. And that could be with any kind of relationship. Could be with roommates. Roommates who are the same gender are going to have some kind of complementarianism. And it's so these things aren't dictated by society or by gender per se. They're they're bespoke to the relationship in which they find themselves. So the invention of the tractor, 1892, what's that gonna do? That's really gonna change some things about how society is structured. Now, we're just trying to do things easier. When people invent the tractor, they're not thinking about changing society and creating a landscape for feminism. They're not trying to do that, and I'm not saying the word feminism as it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just trying to state the facts, okay, of what has happened. And then what else comes? We have oral contraception that comes out approved by the FDA in 1957 for the sake of regular. By the way, if you have kids listening to this, it may get kind of touchy. I don't know, depending on the uh, maturity level of your kids. We could be talking about some things today. Just FYI. So in 1957, um, pills were approved by the FDA to regulate menstrual cycles, and in 1960, oral contraception was approved by the FDA. Now, how might this affect society? Just these little technological inventions that are trying to optimize for one little thing tends to have unforeseen cascading consequences across the society. Now, it's important not to pass moral judgment on such things as good or bad, and then choose sides to fight for the preferred societal superego. Well, things were a lot better before this happened. We need to get back to that. And my daughters are never going to take that pill. You could do that all you want, but that's not going to change society. And you may raise kids who are not with the current society and don't understand it and don't get along with it and don't fit in, and they're going to make a bunch of stupid decisions when they get older because they don't understand the environment in which they live. And then your kids and your grandkids are still in this society and will be influenced by it. So we need to step away from how like there's a phrase, neither nostalgia nor utopia. We need to step away from how things used to be or how we think things should be, and we need to focus more on understanding how they are and how they're going to be. And we need to prepare for that. And we need to prepare ourselves and our kids' kids for how things are and how they're going to be in the society in which they find themselves, rather than how we think they should be or how they used to be. Are we tracking? That's wisdom. Good evening from the UK. It's good to see you. So instead, it's better to simply understand cause and effect and incentives and rewards. And those kinds of things shape societies. And we just need to understand them without passing moral judgment on them. Don't get caught up in how you think they should be. How they shape human behavior, decisions, and values. Don't assess moralistically, assess anthropologically, like you're studying a culture from the outside that's just doing things. Okay. So, why would marriage be developed from an anthropological standpoint? Why would this thing come about? Why would we decide to have marriage in a society? Okay. And it could be something like this. There's basically 3 points that I want to point out here. Why would marriage be developed from an anthropological standpoint? Number one, so that kids born in societies above Dunbar numbers would have dedicated parents. Because we no longer have a tribe to raise the parents, now we need to know who's going to raise the kids. So, marriage is a pretty good institution for the rearing of children in a society that is above Dunbar numbers. And number two, we need paternal certainty in an agrarian society so that land can be inherited by an heir. That might be a good reason for marriage. We need to know who the parents are, so we know who the kids are, so we know who the land goes to, right? And then so that men, without tribal Dunbar level accountability, so that men cannot exploit a woman's reproductive vulnerability without taking responsibility. We don't want, in other words, it's societal accountability so that men can't be jerks and impregnate a woman, leaving her incredibly vulnerable, and then just run off and do his own thing. So when marriage is the threshold before reproduction, the idea is that it prevents that from happening. So it's a pretty good idea societally that we don't create human beings without some kind of arrangement for how those human beings are going to be cared for, and the parents that created them being around. Okay. So marriage helps us do these things. Sometimes I like to think of the experiment of, this would be a good way to select politicians too. The experiment of just taking just 100 naked people and putting them on an island somewhere, and how would you recreate society from the ground up? Okay, how would you make clothes? What would you make them for? How would you partner things up? And then imagine you're starting with a blank slate. Eventually, you would find out, oh, some activities produce human beings. Maybe we should put some kind of maybe we should put some kind of structure around the creation of human beings so that they just don't come out willy-nilly with nobody to care for them, or leaving the mothers vulnerable while they are with child with no resources. Okay. So if you had to create these things from the ground up, there are good reasons for doing them. Does that make sense? And there's basically three reasons to have marriage. Okay. Now, English word love. When we think of marriage, we think, oh, love. We don't have arranged marriages, we have love marriages. People say things like that. But the English word love is way too big of a word to effectively describe marital relationship interaction. Relationships can exist where there is no love. I have a relationship with my uh, car dealership for my 2 free oil changes that I get every year. I have a relationship with them. Do I love them? No, I'm not going to lay down my life for them. I'm not there to create affordance of choice for the car dealership. I know some of the people there. I know their first names. I can walk in and say, hello, so and so. Okay. So I have a relationship with them. Am I in a loving relationship with them? No, I'm in a transactional relationship with them. And if it's friendly and if it blooms into friendship, great. But that's not why we have a relationship. We have a relationship so I can get my 2 free oil changes and whatever else I need with my car. You understand? We have relationships that don't have love. And true love expects nothing in return and cannot be exchanged for anything. Therefore, you can have love with no relationship. Now, the word transaction is a very dirty word when it comes to relationships. We don't like to say it. It's what these divorce lawyers, James Sexton, he says, let's say the quiet part out loud. There is a quiet part that we never like to say. Like when you go to apply for a job, you never go up to the employer and say, hey, I want you to give me as much money as possible in exchange for the least amount of work possible. You don't say that. But that's exactly what everybody's doing, and that's what everybody knows everybody's doing, but we don't say it. We don't come out and say it because it kinda ruins the chemistry of the thing. There's societally polite things to do. So what we're gonna do today is we're talking about how things actually are, and there are a lot of components to relationships that we are going to say out loud today that typically do not get said out loud, or people are s 2 reasons they don't get said out loud. Some of them don't sound polite when you say them, and also we are com we are actually we have fooled ourselves. We have deceived ourselves into pretending that these realities aren't realities. Well, we're gonna step out of that today. We're gonna look at how are things? How are they? So the word transaction is a dirty word when it comes to relationships. It conjures up images of anything from mercenary to toxicity to narcissism, even psychopathy, and kind of sounds like even prostitution to some degree. So we don't like the word transactional when it comes to relationships. And I understand why, but we need to be mature about this. We need to face the facts. Relationships are transactional. And I'm going to show you that. And if you understand this going into marriage, it's really going to help you. It's very much going to help. It's like having a budget where you tell your money where to go. It helps you to know these things, to know what you're dealing with. So we're here to help. We're not here to turn everybody into psychopaths who just have transactional relationships and use people. We're not, see what I'm saying? But you need to know what's happening. So, however, the more mature and aware a person is, the more we see the reality for what it is. And I'm going to show you some examples here in a second. Now, let's look at the difference between love and relationship. The difference between love and relationship. You need to understand this difference. There's my slide. True love expects nothing in return and cannot be exchanged for anything. Tracking? Relationship is the medium where unequal goods of similar value are exchanged. Don't you have a relationship with your spouse? Okay. It is not purely true love. There's something being exchanged. And we're going to look at what this is. And this video, by the way, is going to go in our relationship playlist also, not just the Colossians playlist. If a person truly loves someone else, they want what's best for the best parts of that person. What is best for the best of parts of that person might involve letting them go and foregoing the relationship because it isn't what's best for them. Let's face it. You might not be the absolute best thing for another person, but you're still in relationship with them. If you really love them, sometimes really loving somebody means letting them go. I think there's a movie where the guy puts a woman on a plane with another man at the end of the movie because even though he would like for himself to be with her, he knows that it's in her best interest not to be with him, so he sends her off with somebody else. That's true love. True love can exist where there's no relationship. So we got to get this out of our head that love and relationship necessarily go together because they do not necessarily go together. It's great when they do, but they don't necessarily go together. If we take relationships seriously, we need to be mature about it and be honest with ourselves that relationships are transactional in nature. Well, let me do this so we can see all the words I'm using here. Our concept of love and romance, or concepts of love and romance, are very much a sublimation of religious tendencies toward that which is ever unobtainable into human objects of obsession. In other words, there's a religious tendency toward the unobtainable godliness, the unobtainable absolute oneness with God that we would just love to experience. And this unobtainability is kind of a romantic gesture. And we have taken this religious notion, this religious tendency, and we have injected it into the person that we're in relationship with in a marriage situation. Now, there are historic reasons for this, which we cannot take the time to get into right now, but historically, a good argument could be made that our mindset of this kind of thing really came about right around the 1200s. I'm not going to get into that right now. So, so let's get into the transactional aspect of this. Okay, think about a relationship, and there are things I want you to consider. In So love is too big of an English word. It helps us to use words other than love to describe what we want what we might want in a marriage relationship. And some of these words, now this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just an exemplary list. Huh, all without distinction, not all without exception for you Calvinists out there. What might you want in a marriage? You might want companionship, friendship, intimacy, partnership, affection. By the way, partnership is the number one romantic fantasy of men. And men are more romantic than women, by the way. I'm speaking psychologically, anthropologically, and across the board. I'm not saying that there aren't women who are more romantic than men, but generally, men tend to be more romantic than women. But also note this, it's important to understand romance, our concepts of romance and this obsession with the other person, this religious tendency in sublimation. If you look in history of narratives and stories, how do the romances end? They're usually tragedies, okay? And there's a reason for that. And before this religious sublimation got injected into relationships, the Greeks saw being in love, being what you might call being struck with limerence, as being hit with an arrow by Cupid, like it's a wound, like you've been shot in a battle. To feel this extreme twitterpation or limerence, or feeling of longing and desire and yearning for this other person, they saw this as like an illness, like a very negative disposition, to be a disadvantage, to be struck with this, and it's something you don't want. Just information. Just information. Do with it what you will. So what else? What might we want? Companion, friendship, intimacy, partnership, affection, attraction, adoration, desire, help, assistance, conversation, connection, chemistry, meaning, loyalty, respect, trust, support, patience, adventure, security, collaboration, playfulness, honesty, forgiveness, attentiveness, presence, kindness, excitement. Those are just some examples. Okay. Now, for those who like the romantic idea that marriage is not transactional, you tell me, how many things could you cross off this list as receiving from a potential partner and still be interested in a marriage? Think about that. You say, oh, we're in love with each other and our relationship is not transactional. Okay, it's not transactional. Let's say you're no longer getting loyalty. You still interested? Let's say you're not getting honesty. Are you still interested in a relationship? Let's say you don't get kindness from them. Are you still interested? Let's say there's no attraction. Are you still interested? Do you see what I'm saying? If you are not interested, what if you have no security? What if you don't have any support? What if there's no trust? What if there's no respect? You see, if you're not interested in a relationship, once I start crossing these things off the table, you you are interested in a transactional relationship. You want something back. What does that mean? That means it is not pure love. It is a transactional relationship. Are you following me? Any kind of relationship, we defined this a minute ago. Any kind of relationship is the medium where unequal goods of similar value are exchanged. And what do some of those look like in a marriage? They look like some of these things. That's what they look like. Unequal goods of similar value are exchanged. I like receiving conversation from Paula. I give, she gives. We're both providing this to each other. We both like conversations with each other. If we stopped offering this in return, the relationship would probably end. Doesn't mean that I don't love her, doesn't mean that I wouldn't continue loving her. But without some of these things, there could be no relationship. Are we tracking? I try to explain this. I'm glad I took the time to make these slides. I try to explain these kind of things to people. And, oh, well, our relationship is not transactional. Then you don't have a relationship. You can love somebody from a distance. You can send them on a plane with somebody else and love them from a distance. That might be what's best for them. So if you are in relationship, you are transacting something. And maybe some of these things are the things that you are transacting. Do you not expect to get these from your partner? I expect some of these. I expect a lot of these things from my partner. And if they weren't there, there would be no relationship. Are you following me? Was- Y'all let me know if this is a hard pill to swallow. Too much, too fast. Something else to bear in mind about, so there's some differences between men and women. And it could be because of, some of this stuff in our society that we've like thousands and thousands of years of society being shaped by certain things, or maybe something that's biologically instilled in us. But it turns out that even after the invention of the tractor and the pill and all this kind of stuff, where things are more equaled out on a gender basis in society, there are still certain realities that tend to be the case. And for example, men still are expected to approach women. Men are still expected to, even though women are earning as much as men in many, many cases, men are still expected to exhibit chivalry, pay for the first date, and or subsequent date, all kinds of things that we still expect differently from men and women without it ever being stated explicitly out loud. Brian says it's hard, but it makes sense. Yeah, I'm telling you, I told you at the beginning, you got to let this stuff sit with you for a few months. Okay, because it's not going to be. It's not what we're used. It's not the way we're used to talking. Women tend to be the gatekeepers of sexual opportunity. They've done studies where, and what I'm talking about is society right now in society, the way people are in society. Women tend to be the gatekeepers. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions. I'm not saying there aren't women out there, but they do these studies where I don't even get. Well, they would take a beautiful woman up to 100 men and ask if they would be willing to be intimate with them, and all of the men, nearly all of the men say, "Yes, I would be willing to do that." They do the same thing in reverse, take a very attractive guy who looks like he's rich, all kinds of things, to a bunch of women, ask if they would be willing to, be intimate with them right there. Almost all the women say no. So the willingness factor is very different for women and men. Uh, Women are much more threat sensitive. There's all kinds of things going on. So women tend to be the gatekeepers of sexual opportunity. And so society might implement something like, well, sexual opportunity could result in having a baby. So let's have an official threshold beyond which sexual intimacy can occur, and that is marriage, because we don't want to be producing any babies. Well, now we've got the pill. Now we can have this kind of thing without babies being produced. So now how does that affect human behavior? Just something to think about. And in our culture, it says out culture. What does that mean? I need to change how I spelled that. In our culture, men tend to be the gatekeepers of commitment. And this may sound crass, but this is kind of why men are bragging about their body count and women like to show off their rings. That's the way our society is structured right now. Women are always wanting the commitment out of men, and men are looking for that, sexual opportunity in our society. It's kind of driven. It's in people's biology that they behave this way. It's in your, like, if you watched our video about the body brain and the mind brain, this is your body brain that is like this. Whether you want it to be or not, doesn't matter how you were enculturated. There's certain things about our body brain that are just biological realities. So this slide is a very, very important slide. Before we move on to other information, I need to make sure that everyone has integrated this information. Relationships are, women are more hypergamous too. Yeah, we're going to talk about hypergamy in a second. There are differences between men and women, and relationships are transactional. If you have a relationship, you are transacting something. And it's not evil, mean, or rude, or psychopathic, or narcissistic to say this. It is a reality. If we can start crossing stuff off this list and you're no longer interested in a relationship, because then yes, you're admitting that it is transactional. So get used to saying that. Since the transaction of value cannot be avoided in relationships, they can be understood partially, though not fully. Understand that by comparing them in aggregate to economic models and marketplace value. Now we're reducing humans to marketplace commodities. I understand how terrible that sounds, but just bear with me. Looking at things like Jane Goodall would, like you're studying an alien planet, how do humans behave? Economics is really a big word that means human behavior, how humans exchange things. That's what economics is. And there is, since relationships are transactional and we are exchanging things, some of them are intangible, but we're still exchanging things. You can use economic models to understand human behavior, which is what we're going to do today. The marketplace value is essentially a reference to the person's relational optionality. In other words, how many men would be willing to date this woman? If it's a lot, she has high optionality. How many women would be willing to date this man? If it's a lot, he has high optionality. If it's very low, he has low optionality. The more options they have for dating, that is, the more people who would willingly date them, the higher their sexual marketplace value. Right? So a woman's highest value, optionality. So when I say marketplace value, what I'm talking about is their optionality. A woman's highest marketplace value is aggregately while they are in their 20s. So across society, typically women are most attractive to men. And when I say attractive, I'm not just talking about physically, but would they make a good wife kind of thing? Am I attracted to them for other reasons in their 20s? Men's highest marketplace value aggregately is while they are from about 35 to 50. So it's very different. And there is a crossover rate at a point at which women have higher optionality, and it crosses after the age of 30, it crosses over to men where they tend to have more optionality. This is important to understand with hypergamy and things like this. So when it comes to how society has marriage and why we have relationships the way that they do, if relationship distribution was 100% capitalistic, okay? Everybody just go out there and get the relationships you can. Go get them. Then the Pareto distribution would take place. It would take effect. It's also called Matthew's principle, and this happens in economics. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. So, in other words, like those with the most podcast ratings get the best guests and ratings. Since Joe Rogan is the most famous and successful podcaster, he gets the most opportunities to continue podcasting. To him that hath shall it be given. That's the principle. And those with the most record deals tend to get offered the most record deals. So since someone like Taylor Swift is very successful, they will be offered more opportunities to be more successful. That's the Matthew principle. And then the Pareto distribution is that basically a square root of the people doing a thing produce 50% of what's available. In other words, the square of all the podcasters, let's say that there are 100 podcasters, just to make it easy. 10 of them are producing 50% of the content and getting 50% of the attention and money and that sort of thing. This is Solomon taking a selfie with his 700 wives and 300 friends with benefits. I have a study. I know of an older person who was dating on the dating apps, and they are in the southeast area, and they thought that FWB stood for Fort Walton Beach, like that's where they're from. They did not know that FWB was short for Friends with Benefits. That's kind of a funny story. So what would happen then? What would happen in a purely capitalistic distribution of relationships is that the most successful and attractive men would accumulate all the women, and there would be many men with no women. You would have like in the Bible, they had multiple wives. Over in some countries and in Mormonism, original Mormonism, there's polygamy where men have multiple wives. So monogamy is, among other things, a sort of relationship socialism. Now, I know most of us are, a lot of people, we're pro capitalist and we're anti socialism. I got it. All right. But monogamy is, among other things, a sort of relationship socialism where women are more equally distributed to less successful and less attractive men. I know they're not distributed. I know they're making their own choices. It's not like there's a factory producing women and everybody gets issued one from the supply room. Okay. But I'm saying it this way to kind of be stark with economic terms on purpose to kind of rattle us and to think about this. This helps lend toward a more patriarchal society where participation ensures that each man gets his fair share. And that sounds horrible to say that. But we have like an incel community. And right now there are the highest number of people, like men age 30, who have not had a sexual relationship in like more than a year. It's like the highest that it's ever been. Okay. So lots of people not in relationships right now. And the concept of marriage and all this sort of thing is kind of deteriorating. People are losing interest in it. Then you got red pill people and you got feminism. It's almost like there's these little wars going on and people are opting out. Some people are participating, some people aren't participating. It's kind of strange. It's kind of a strange time to live. It's kind of a strange time to see these things. And for people who say that marriage is a construct, well, no, it's an institution created by God. There's actually some signal in that thing that marriage is a construct. There is some signal in that claim. Okay. There is, behaviorally speaking, there's no reason why people can't make relationships in a different way. There are law firms right now doing stuff called alt marriages, where instead of everything being the way we've done it for hundreds and hundreds of years, they make bespoke marriages. Like, we're going to have a marriage, we're going to have a baby, we're going to be married for 20 years, and we're not going to cohabitate. And they have all kinds of different stipulations. They just do things differently. They're called alt marriages, where then there's no reason why societies can't do that. Now, I know we can come up with moralistic and religious reasons why they shouldn't do it under the eyes of God. I know all that. But I'm just saying, behaviorally speaking, if you just look at it as a bunch of talking apes, basically, there's no reason why we can't do it another way. And people recognize this. There really is no reason we can't do it another way. So why are we doing it the way we're doing it? It's a fair question. And we Christians need to start engaging this non-moralistically in order to be able to relate to our society. I'm not saying we should do it. I'm saying we should engage with the ideas in a non-moralistic way so that we can relate to the society around us a little better and see how they're thinking. Don't be so judgmental and against everything all the time. I have a few throwaway lines here, like we like to say that marriages are based on love and that relationships are not transactional. All right, we already covered that. Probably not going to talk a lot about this, but security and excitement are on opposite ends of the relationship spectrum. I'm probably going to do a whole video separate on that, and I'm going to try to make it short, but you might want security. I have security here out of a relationship, and you might want excitement out of a relationship. That sounds kind of cool, but it turns out the reason the excitement is on the front end of a relationship usually is because security and excitement are typically inversely proportionate to one another. And the more excitement you have, the more at risk you are of the relationship ending for various different reasons. The more things that trigger egoic attachments, the more risk the security is. And the more excitement you have, the more thing might trigger your egoic attachments. Anyway, probably do a whole nother video on that. Somebody mentioned hypergamy. Women are more hypergamous too. So let's talk a little bit about hypergamy. Hypergamy is the tendency for women, okay, to be attracted to men that in status, career advancement, education, health, location, lifestyle, personality, attractiveness, wealth, income are equal to them or higher than them. And I'm just going to shorten this to status. Status equal or higher status, men in the aggregate tend to be attracted to women who are equal or lower status. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm not saying it should or should not happen. This is interesting. Um, Muppet Tameds, Muppet Ton Meds. I just read in Deuteronomy when God was talking about their kings, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away, neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver. It's interesting in the Old Testament, uh, just because the king had 700 wives doesn't mean that some people, like multiple people, had multiple wives in the Old Testament, not just kings. Okay, doesn't make really any comments in the Old Testament whether it's good or bad. It gives societal instructions. You know, it's also interesting though, for all the things that the Old Testament does say, you don't have this phrase, wives submit yourselves to your husbands in the Old Testament. All these laws about families and who can do this and who can do that, all the different things, the submit stuff is not there. Isn't that interesting? It shows up when Paul is talking to Christians who are in a secular society. Now let's change that a little bit. Let's forget that Paul's information comes from God. He's inspired by God. What if he's just talking to a secular society and he's talking from the standpoint of somebody who's wise in the ways of human behavior, of incentives and reward and cause and effect? What if it's just a smart person like a Jane Goodall or a very smart behavioral psychologist who learned things through experimentation who's giving us good advice? What if we looked at it that way? Wouldn't that be kind of interesting? Wouldn't it change kind of how we think about it? Maybe we should try thinking about it that way. So, hypergamy is the tendency for women to be attracted to men of equal or higher status and men to be attracted to women of equal or lower status. Now, here's the catch, men. A woman may, I know a scenario where a school teacher who makes what school teachers make married a doctor, medical doctor, who's quite successful. Okay. And so he's a doctor, she's a school teacher. They're married. That's their situation. Huh. Now, so you could say that in status, she was attracted up and married up in status to a doctor. You could say that. But once she's there, that is now her status because she's a partner with that person and his status is her status and they now share a status together. They validate or in married couples validate or invalidate each other. Oh wow, she's with him. That must mean she's great, or he's with her. That must mean he's great. Because if you already think she's great and then he's with her, wow, she's either stupid or he's great. Something like that. People tend to validate and invalidate each other. So now she is of that status. What does that mean? She is now in her body. This is a biological thing. Hypergamy is still active. Once the relationship is sealed and they're married, whatever, does not mean that the attraction realities of the body brain stop. So she is now still attracted to men that are of equal status and now of higher status, and now it's even higher. So now she's looking up to her body brain is now attracted to men of a higher status. So before, what was considered higher than her status is now considered equal to her status. Um, this is going to sound very terrible and crass, but typically in the aggregate, there are exceptions to this, but men tend to, if they're going from one relationship to another, they are moving the quality of intimacy. Let's just say that is they're going to move up in their quality of intimacy when they go from one relationship to another, at least at first. And then women, when they go from one relationship to another, their standard of living typically is going to go up. Okay. Like if they're dating a guy and they're living in a house together and he's got his own job, she's probably not going to start dating a college student who's living in a dorm. That kind of thing. See what I'm saying? Or who has roommates, that kind of thing. Not that stage of life. So the standard of living or the quality of intimacy, people tend to move up in their next relationships. This tends to be true. Um, So now what's that gonna do? It's called monkey branching. So I try to get AI to generate this little photo of monkey branching. It's, ha, she has 2 left hands, by the way, from this AI photo. But monkey branching, you know how monkeys swing from one tree branch to another? Monkey branching is when a woman swings from well, jumps from relationship to relationship and typically has the next relationship lined up before she gets into it, before she leaves the previous one. Kinda like people do with jobs. Like, I'm not just gonna quit my job. I'm gonna line up another job, then I'm going to resign, do my 2 weeks, then start the other job. Women tend to do that a lot more than men do. It's called monkey branching, where they're just going from one branch to the next, from one to the next, and typically they're going to go up. So, what is this? When we look at our passage of scripture, this is why it's probably a good idea to focus on this. I underline this. Look at this word here. The emphasis really isn't on the submit part, it's really on the own part. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, as is fit in the Lord. In other words, uh, put some kind of let's try to subdue that body brain's tendency to be attracted to over and higher and stick with the one you've got, kind of thing. As Roberta pointed out, husbands love your wives and give yourself for them. That's another thing too, and that is in Ephesians, and we could talk about that, but that's not in this passage. So we're trying to focus on this today. I'm trying to give you this perspective today of what we're talking about here. So this brings up the own part. So hypergamy, the tendency for hypergamy makes it very important for this word to be here. Okay, we're tracking to your own husbands. So we're sticking with what we've got. Now I've got some other things. And I think I'm gonna skip some of this because it's in we did some prenup videos and I got some slides from there. I wanna use this analogy that I got from a psychologist named Orion Taraban. And when you have ship captains and passengers as the analogy that he uses for relationships, and these are not gender specific, especially in our society, but they will tend to be, okay? So it's nothing stopping a woman from being a ship captain, but because of hypergamy and because of other biological realities, it just so happens that it tends to be the man who needs to be the ship captain, okay? Because you're typically gonna get a 20-something-year-old woman, like the ideal marketplace value, if we go back to that language, the height of optionality for men and women to cross the where do they cross over? It's when the woman's in her 20s and the man's about 35 to 50. So a 26-year-old woman and a 34-year-old man get married, something like that. And I know some people don't do it that way. I get it. That's fine. We'll talk about that too. I have some slides at the end for that. But in order for a 35-year-old man to be attractive, for him to cross that threshold, what makes older men attractive isn't just their age. And when I say attractive, remember, I'm not just talking about physical attractiveness. I'm talking about that which would make them ideal as a partner or a mate for somebody, which would extend beyond just how they look. How do they live? So, do they have an emotionally compelling lifestyle? And the three things that Orion Taraban says is they need to be able to build a boat, they need to be able to learn to sail, and they need to be able to plot a course. This would be analogous to building an emotionally compelling lifestyle with purpose and stability, along with competence and capability to accomplish that purpose. One of the things that makes men attractive to women is visible competence. And visible competence, and there are what you might call contextual alphas. So if you are on a volleyball court, if there is a man that tends to be the best player, there's going to be something in a woman's body brain that's going to be attracted to that man. If you're in the business world, whichever one's making the best deals, there's going to be things in women's body brain that is attracted to that man. Whichever one has the highest amount of visible competence. So visible competence tends to be attractive as a feature in men, and men typically do not have a whole lot of visible competence until they're about in their mid 30s or so. And so this would be analogous to building an emotionally compelling lifestyle with purpose and stability, along with competence, capability to accomplish that purpose. So you build a boat. In other words, you need to spend your time in your 20s learning, figuring yourself out. Let's get your stuff together. Let's get some kind of career going. Let's get some kind of direction in your life going. And you need to learn how to direct your life, how to get it to go toward things that you want it to go toward. How do I accomplish this? You're starting to set goals. You're starting to accomplish things. And now I can plot courses. I can plot short-term courses. I can plot long-term courses. I can plot a course. And so a man needs to be able to do this. Here's the direction I'm going in my life. So in order for a date not to be like a job interview, you kind of want to hear what the person's view of their own future is to know if these three things are in place. And a woman, when she's talking to a man, she kind of wants to know if these three things are in place. And if they are, great. She will probably be attracted. She's more likely to be attracted. So when we so I have these images here. I like the way PowerPoint splits them up for me like this. So build a boat, learn how to sail, and learn how to plot a course. Now, in fundamentalist Christianity, all the decisiveness for sailing and course plotting came from the paradigm, not from the man's experience. Thus, if a man gets married in his 20s or 30s and he's been a fundamentalist Christian the whole time, a very serious one, especially from the time of childhood, this is a serious disadvantage in the world because a woman really isn't marrying that man and his choices and the outcomes of his choices. She's marrying his role as an avatar of the paradigm and its choices and dictates and its consequences. So neither the man nor her really know who he is. They are both married to this avatar of a paradigm. He's basically still Pinocchio and hasn't turned into a real boy. So it's very important for a man to spend his youthful adult years, like in his 20s, making his own decisions, calling his own shots, and seeing the consequences of his own decisions to see how they pan out. So he can see what he's made of. Now, if he's 30 and he's made all his decisions in accordance with the dictates of his religion, he doesn't know what he's made of yet. He only knows what the religion is made of and the consequences that following the what he thought he religiously should do, he only knows those consequences. He doesn't know, and so he can't develop his own wisdom because he can't learn from experience from his own choices. Are you getting me? So it's important for a man to actually be a man, to have learned how to make his own choices before he gets down serious with a committed relationship, because you don't know who you are yet. And if you are a very serious fundamentalist Christian, you are further subduing who you really are. And neither one of you, neither you nor your spouse will know who you are. And eventually, who you are will start to come out and surprise both of you, and the relationship's probably going to fail. By the way, we're going to do another relationship on what constitutes failure. And there are lots of ways for a relationship to fail other than it ending. And sometimes a relationship ending does not constitute a failure. Let's say you want to date somebody and say, hey, we're going to date for 3 months and then I'm going to leave for college. And say you date for, or I'm going to leave for, be deployed, whatever it is. And so you date for 3 months. You did what you said you were going to do. You leave on good terms. Is that relationship a failure? No, it's not a failure. You did what you said you're going to do. Did you enjoy the 3 months? Did you learn something? Did you learn something about yourself? Not a failure. Not everything that ends is a failure. And not everything that stays together is a success. That's very important to understand. Staying married is not, or staying in a relationship, not even talking about marriage, is not the end all be all of success. Some relationships need to end. Now, presuming, we're kind of, what are we talking about? We're talking about this passage of scripture. Presuming a hypergamous relationship. Are you tracking? We're going to presume a hypergamous relationship where a woman in her 20s has found a man with high optionality, okay? And she wants to secure a commitment with him. If a woman has found a man that is doing this well, doing this, what? He built his own boat, He learned how to sail. He learned how to plot a course. If a woman found a man that is doing this well and non-paradigmatically, in other words, he's not just following the dictates of what the Baptist said he's supposed to do, her difficulty will be in securing a long-term commitment from him because he will have high optionality. And devoting himself to one single individual will come at the opportunity cost of all the other options. Okay? So if a man has an opportunity to have a relationship with 100 different women, why would he commit to you? And so when he does commit to you, it's at the opportunity cost of all those other ones. So what is going to make a man commit? So when you get a man married who is 20, 22, 23, 25, somewhere around there, he doesn't have as much optionality as he's going to have later. So some women will lock a man in at that age when he doesn't have as much optionality, and she may struggle. They may both struggle with the idea later that she wasn't his best possible option. And then if he would have waited, he could have done better. And if you see a woman that's jealous, she may have basically what she's communicating to the man when she's jealous is that she thinks her body brain thinks that she's not his best possible option and that somebody else might be perceived to be so, best perceived option. And so when a partner is jealous, they're communicating to their partner indirectly that they think they may not be their best perceived option for them. It's interesting how that works. So the best thing to do might be to not ever get jealous, which exudes a kind of confidence that I am the best perceived option for you, and I don't care whatever else comes along. It's not going to phase me. Anyway, that's kind of a side point. But anyway, this is going to come at the opportunity cost. So it is kind of good for the feeling of security for a woman to secure a man when he has high optionality, because then he and she both know that he had his pick of the litter and could have got anyone he wants and picked you. And it's also good for a man to pick a woman when she's got her highest optionality because, in other words, you kind of both know that you didn't settle for what you could get because you squandered your period of high optionality or haven't reached it yet. Roberta says this is another informational video of many that I wish I could have accessed in my early years. Instead, I got IFBism, which is Independent Fundamental Baptistism. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right there with you. I wish I would have known this stuff before I made some of the decisions that I knew. Once a woman has an opportunity with a man who has high optionality, her best bet is to do what? Number one, be authentically emotionally invested in the course that is plotted. Make sure that's what you want. Okay. Number two, make herself useful. If a woman can make herself useful in a man's life, she can secure a de facto commitment out of him by embedding herself. Now, this may sound manipulative and tricky, but by embedding herself in his life in a way that he comes to rely on her and would not be as successful without her, be be useful, be helpful and useful. That is a good thing to do. The next thing, uh, physical intimacy should be frequent and enthusiastic. We're talking about securing somebody who has high optionality in a commitment and keeping them in a long-term commitment if that's what you want. And fourth, be respectful of the person as a human and the degree of accomplishment that they have, because after all, they have built a boat, they have learned how to sail, and they know how to plot a course. You need to respect that. You want to find a good place to learn how to respect things, watch ESPN. Respect means to do again, spect, look. Means to look again. What do they do on ESPN all day? They are watching replays of things people did great, sometimes bloopers, but things people did. Look at this touchdown. Look at this amazing pass. Look at this stuff. They're respecting. They're looking again. That's a good place to see what respect looks like, is to pay homage to the accomplishments that somebody else has done. And so a good thing to do in a marriage relationship is both people be respectful of each other. And then the last thing, and this kind of goes, and respect also is don't say uncharitable things about your spouse, especially to other people, whether he's there or not, whether she's there or not. Don't say uncharitable things about them behind their back or around your friends, or don't do that. Don't go complain to your mom about your husband. Okay? That's part of respect. Don't go complain to your dad or your mom about your wife. That's part of respect. And that is tied closely together. Sometimes this list combines these two and combines these two. So there's really only three things, you know. But and don't be problematic. It's really that simple. Be useful, be intimate frequently and enthusiastically, and don't be a problem, be respectful. Really just those three things. If a woman is trying to secure a man with high optionality, that's really all you need to do. Men are very simple creatures, and that's really all it takes. Not that complicated. Now, think about this. What if we took all this and we say maybe that could be called submit? Maybe that's what we're talking about. Be useful, be part of the program, be invested, be a good partner, and be respectful. To who? Your own husband. No monkey branching. Your own husband. No monkey branching. I think it turns out when you look at things from an anthropological standpoint, to me, it seems like this is a good idea, even if it's given from a psychologist to a secular society. We don't necessarily need to think of the things that are in the Bible just as authoritative because they came from God. They might just make sense. Okay? Does it make sense? It might just make sense. If you're on a boat, if you're a passenger on a boat that somebody else built and they know how to sail that thing, you might just not want to cause problems. You might want to get with the program, be part of that thing. Help that thing sail. Be the first mate. Help this thing go. Be an engineer. Make sure the engine's running. Put some gas in the engine. Raise the sail every once in a while. It might be in your best interest if you're a passenger on that boat to participate in a compliant way. Is this making sense? Even if you live, even if you leave religion completely out of it, leave God completely out of it. This still makes sense to be a compliant, helpful passenger. Now, there are other kinds of relationships, and I'm not going to get into these a lot, but there are co-founders. What are co-founders? Instead of say a 25-year-old woman marrying a 35-year-old male, you might have two 22-year-olds getting married. Well, now founders have equity, okay? And they are going to build their stuff together. Now, and then what we were just talking about is a captain with passenger or crew. But you might also have co-captains. What if you have two people? What if you have a husband and a wife, a man and a woman who have both built their boat and both know how to sail and both know how to plot a course? And this brings up what could be called the two-body problem, where it becomes problematic when ultimately at the end of the day, somebody's career is probably going to take precedence over the other one. Like, why are we going to, if we have to move, what would constitute moving? Would it be his job moving or her job moving? If his job moves, does he get another job and she keeps her job? Like, I know a situation where uh, um, the husband married a doctor and the wife is a doctor. Okay. It and he's not a doctor. Okay. And she makes more money than him. So it might be that her job and the requirements of her job dictate certain things, like where they're going to live, what kind of opportunities they're going to pursue, when or if they move. Now, if you got two doctors and they're both doing different things and going in different directions, it might be difficult to have a relationship. So, more often than not, there will be a relationship with significant asymmetries. I hate to use the word complementary because there's an ism that goes along with that that I do not buy into. Okay. But usually something's got to take precedence. Something's got to be the thing that calls and says right or wrong, yes or no. And because of hypergamy in society, it's usually whatever the man has going on with the boat he built and the sailing that he's doing and the course he's plotting, usually that takes precedence. Not always, but it makes more sense to be on board with that program. And the co-captain's problem, this is rarely going to work out. I'm not saying it can't work out, but they're going to have they're more often than not going to have some difficulties, and the co-founders may run into similar kinds of difficulties. But they're also going to have some insecurities and some other things going on as well. It's going to be some different things. The passenger crew with the captain relationship might be ideal for a lot of reasons. If we know that there's going to be some asymmetries, why not set them up in advance knowing about them rather than like wade forward and see what we get kind of thing. We're going to end this here. On our channel, we do a lot of we now offer one-on-one consultations for and I'm gonna put the donate slide back up here for those who want to donate to this channel. It's very important. I really appreciate that. But we also offer one-on-one consultations for anybody who, and they are paid. Okay, I can't afford to do it for free, but there are a lot of people that I've talked to over the years that get help from having a one-on-one consultation because I can't address everyone's specific situations in these videos. In our videos, we've built a lot of fluency over the years in various different domains. And if you want to get my time to applied to your situation specifically, very happy to set that up. Go to the website, scroll down to the one-on-one consultation. You can click that and we will set up a time. I've had a lot of these recently and I'm getting very positive feedback from everybody that I'm having these with. They're all saying that they're very helpful, well worth the money, and would do it again and recommend it to anybody. So that's the feedback that we're getting. We're staying pretty busy with these. So I appreciate those. So if you want a one-on-one session, we do offer that now. And for everybody else, if you want to support what's going on here and keep these videos coming, please consider going to the donate page and donating to Beyond the Fundamentals. Could not do this without you. A lot of time, space, energy, thought equity. Like I'm sitting around with my family where I'm constantly pulling out a laptop or something or pulling out my notes app. So I'm constantly feeding into the ideas that build into these things. So it takes a lot of time and I wind up distracted a lot and I do it for you. Okay. So if you appreciate that, come to our donate page and show some love. I'd really appreciate that. It'd be nice if this grows into a business of its own one day. That's kind of what we're hoping for. I got 30 more titles, more than 30 titles of videos that I'm working on right now. The next one that I want to put out is religious romantic projection. And I have just about all the slides built for that. That's coming out soon. And I got about 30 more coming. So subscribe to the channel, share these, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you and good day.